guys. I don't know how to start this thing, so I'm just gonna lay out a scenario for you. I'm a research assistant at Laurentian University, and as a research assistant, I am working with the ACHWM, which was actually created in my hometown of Wicomico. So during one of my assignments, I was allowed to listen in on a phone call the team was having with a bunch of other academics and professionals working on a paper that addressed the effectiveness of the ACHWM. Well, during this phone call, one of the academics said that the use of the term emotional health was confusing because the more popular term is mental health. To which my supervisor replied, "Do any of you want to explain this? Marnie, Trish, Shanna?" She suggested us because we are the Indigenous people listening in on the phone. Marnie tried to explain that the term mental health means something different to First Nations people than to the dominant population. To which the original academic replied,
"I don't understand why we can't just use the term mental health."
For those of you thinking
what's the big deal? Why not use the term mental health? More people would understand what you're talking about anyways.
I'm going to put that into perspective for you. So to begin to unpack this scenario, I would like to look at a concept called social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is a term that came about in the mid-1800s. Basically, it tried to apply biological concepts to human society. Things like natural selection and survival of the fittest. Hopefully you all have some sort of idea of evolution and Charles Darwin. Moving on. The social Darwinist worldview consisted of 4 assumptions. First, humans are governed by biological laws. Second, the pressure of population growth on resources generates a struggle for existence among organisms, so we all fight to stay alive. Third, physical and mental traits provide an advantage on their possessors in this struggle, or in sexual competition, which advantages can, through inheritance, spread through the population. Lastly, the increasing effects of selection and inheritance over time account for the emergence of new species and the elimination of others. Weaker species die, and stronger ones prevail and reproduce. So why am I talking about this? Well, social Darwinism, or the idea that one species of human is better than another, became very prominent in the late 1800s, especially in the world of academia. Therefore, a biologically, rather than environmentally, centered racial discourse became increasingly popular. A variety of sciences, primarily anthropology, embraced this ideology and raced to study Indigenous people, under the assumption that they were dying out. In addition, once this idea of social Darwinism spread across the academic realm, there was a redefinition of fitness as intelligence, and an identification of intelligence with white races. Professors actually taught concepts like social Darwinism in their classrooms. So as an Indigenous person trying to navigate university, or any marginalized person, how would you feel being told that your race is less intelligent and less worthy of knowledge? That you don't deserve an education, good social class standing, economic stability, decent healthcare, or reproductive rights because of your race? Due to the laws of social Darwinism, you as a people will eventually die out and make room for the more superior race. I'm including this information to basically say that the university as an institution has a history embedded in power relationships, white supremacy, oppression, and just outright racism. So as you can see, the relationship between Indigenous people and academic institutions is one that is not very good. Okay, so the last piece of this puzzle will be to look at Indigenous people and researchers and the tension in that relationship between those two. So for this part of the video, I hope you all have some sort of understanding or knowledge of residential schools in Canada. When the school is on the reserve, the child lives with its parents, who are savages. He is surrounded by savages, and though he may learn to read and write, his habits and training and mode of thought are Indian. He is simply a savage who can read and write. It has been strongly pressed on myself, as the head of the department, that Indian children should be withdrawn as much as possible from parental influence, and the only way to do that would be to put them in central training industrial schools, where they will acquire the habits and modes of thought of white men. That was said by Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, in reference to residential schools. Among the many horrible things that happen in residential schools, the one thing in particular I want to focus on for this video is nutrition experiments that occurred in the schools. Scientists came to view Aboriginal bodies as experimental materials and residential schools as kind of laboratories. The Indigenous children in the study were denied dental service because the researchers believed that the sodium fluoride and other compounds would interfere with their results. This lasted for a period of about 5 years. The residential schools were seen as the ideal spot to conduct these nutrition experiments because the scientists needed an already starved population, eating the same thing, and as wards of the state had little say in whether or not they participated in the study. Here's a fun fact. Through medical experimentation, useless bodies were rendered useful by being made usable in the National Project of Regeneration, thus gaining a utility they were believed otherwise to lack. I'm including this information as an example of why Indigenous people and research have a rocky history and a fragile relationship today. So to sum it all up, when the academic is questioning why can't we just use the term mental health, he's actually dismissing a long and traumatic history of Indigenous people being dismissed, oppressed, marginalized, experiencing violence, being experimented on, killed, and not being allowed to be at the forefront of telling their own histories. Indigenous people, psychology, research, and mental health all intersect at culture. So unlike the mainstream term mental health, in Indigenous or First Nations worldviews, we view mental health as your cognitive ability, intelligence, stuff like that, where the emotional aspect would be your feelings, relationships, emotional well-being. So what the mainstream would consider mental health issues would actually become emotional issues when you're considering the medicine wheel and working with Indigenous people. So as a professional working in a mental health setting, it's important to have an understanding of different cultures and how different terms will mean different things in different cultures. And we also need to realize that psychology as a discipline was built on the foundation of Western knowledge, and that we need to keep challenging that foundation and incorporate different types of knowledges like Indigenous knowledge in order to be able to give the best form of practice to the people who need it.